Hello everybody, I am Prostik Gemali, one of the participants at the Alibaba Summer of Code program 2020, which is Alibaba's second iteration of its annual Summer of Code program. And my mentor was Mercy Ma, a senior software engineer at Alibaba itself. So in this video, I'll be discussing about the project that I did in the past 1.5 months. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you the project title, which is Apache Dubbo Support for Spring Cloud Gateway. As you can already see, there's this swift dichotomy of two different softwares in this project, which is Dubbo and Spring Cloud Gateway. And Dubbo, talking about Dubbo, Dubbo was actually created inside Alibaba, and later on it was handed over to Apache Foundation. And as of today, Dubbo is one of the most highly prioritized works at Apache. Apache is a high-performance RPC framework which adheres to an interface-based remote calling mechanism to invoke remote methods, and it's widely used within the distributed microservice architecture inside Alibaba and beyond. And secondly, Spring Cloud Gateway. Spring Cloud Gateway was developed by the very popular Spring team, and it is based on a rather different event loop concurrency model, which is based on reactive technology or Spring Web Flux. It is basically a non-blocking API, Spring Cloud Gateway. So my project is basically the integration of these two softwares. So this is the genesis of the project. But why do we need this integration? Why is this integration desired? So to realize that, first of all, we need to analyze the current respective needs of both Dubbo and Gateway. Talking about Dubbo, Dubbo is very widely used for service calls, but the thing is, when these microservices start scaling, start increasing, it puts the microservices, these services, backend services, into a very vulnerable zone because the security is compromised. So as a remedy, what we need is, we need a binding gateway which can ensure the security of these service calls, and the user or the call is authenticated, authorized, properly authorized before the service call. So by embracing Spring Cloud Gateway, Dubbo will have a binding gateway which can provide further security measures to Dubbo services. Secondly, on the Spring Cloud Gateway end, Spring Cloud Gateway uses the very popular HTTP REST protocol for method invocation or exposure of server end services. And as we know that RPC, the remote procedure call, is naturally faster than REST, by embracing Dubbo, Spring Cloud Gateway can leverage the advantages of Dubbo RPC, which would eventually give high performance throughput during microservice calls. So this is the reason why we want this integration. But these two software are based on two different sets of technologies, which invites further complexities during the execution of this project. So let's talk about the fundamental differences. Like Dubbo is limited to servlet technology. Spring Cloud Gateway, on the other hand, is based on non-servlet reactive technology, right? Dubbo uses RPC, Spring Cloud Gateway uses REST, and along with that, the uses of class is also different. Dubbo uses servlet request class to retrieve information from browser or from the client, where Spring Cloud Gateway uses server HTTP request. So the very fundamental, very basic difference in the architecture of these two software brings in a whole lot of hitches during the execution. So what was my implementation plan? What was our implementation plan to make these two software compatible to each other? So what the implementation plan was, Spring Cloud Gateway, as you can see in the top left corner, Spring Cloud Gateway would pass the REST requests by using a server web exchange class, and after that what we'll create is a filter implementation. What would this filter implementation do? What would this filter do is it will create a request metadata as per the request being provided by Spring Cloud Gateway and invoke the backend service, the backend Dubbo service, using generic invocation, and it generates Dubbo REST service metadata with respect to the client metadata. And as with the Dubbo, it works normally. It exposes a service to ports like 20880, or for REST, the port is 8280. And in the metadata registry, it registers its services, and the Spring Cloud Gateway, or this filter, subscribes to this registry. And for information, the registry being used in my project is Zookeeper. We could also use Narcos, but to keep things simple, we had opted for Zookeeper. So this is the high level approach of the implementation. So there were certain stages during the course of this project implementation. First of all, very first was create a filter implementation to collect Spring Cloud Gateway's REST data. Second, inject the collected information to an executioner class for further processing. Third, convert the incoming data to match the registry metadata. And this happens to be the third stage is the most important and is the main stage of this entire development process. And fourth is invoking the backend methods using generic invocation. As I already said, Apache Dubbo exposes its services and port as 20880 by using Dubbo protocol, and by using REST protocol, it exposes data in port 8280. So this is about the introduction about the project. So now I just show you what was my implementation or execution process. First of all, after having short discussions, after going through documentations of both Spring Cloud Gateway and Dubbo, I pushed a pull request. I submitted a pull request titled this, where I just implemented simple classes, simple interfaces, and implemented that interface to leverage the user server web exchange that I already talked about earlier, to get the request information from Spring Cloud Gateway. And this was a very basic class, but the thing was that I pushed it against the master branch. So after meticulous discussion with my mentor, what he suggested me to do was, instead of this Alibaba master branch, I pushed my code in a development branch which was titled Spring Cloud Gateway. So I started pushing my code in this branch, which is Spring Cloud Gateway, right? The starter modules, POM, filter, generic invocation, some checkings, tests, and other changes. So finally, I started pushing code in this pull request, and this also happens to be the pull request that consists of the most changes that I made. Most of my time was spent creating this module, this pull request. So as you can see, almost all the implementation was submitted in this pull request. And later on, when I showed this to my mentor, there were a lot of common codes in other files as well as compared to this. So he decided to have a common point, have a common code for most of this, so as to make the code base very efficient, so that the maintaining of the code would be easy. And he also helped me with clearing all unnecessary POM files or unnecessary libraries that I had used. So basically, this was my rough work in this repository, and later on, some of the codes is already being merged by my mentor. He helped me with that. So this was, I guess, the latest commit, that is the polished commit, where I submitted my tests for certain classes, executioner classes. My mentor advised to use this class that I talked about as a common class, so he himself helped me create this class. And so JUnit tests I had recently pushed. So this was about the whole working process. So instead of showing it on GitHub, this pull request, I like to show you in the IDE and run a few examples to make things clear. So first of all, this is the code that I showed you. This is the main code which I was mentioning about in this pull request. So coming to this IDE, I'll just go inside the branch, specific branch, So yeah, so this is the branch. Okay, so this is the branch that I was talking about, and the filter implementation that I said, this is the filter that I had created by implementing a global filter. But later on, when it was pushed into the mergeable state, which was before merging it to the master, it also implemented some gateway filters as well. So yeah, this is the constructor which will receive certain parameters, and this what I was talking earlier, mono, comes from the server web, the servlet reactive Spring. It would, whenever a Spring Cloud gateway, whenever we invoke a gateway, it would execute this filter, and this is the very first method to be invoked. And mono is for that I was talking about, event loop concurrency model. It comes from that philosophy. So server web exchange, as I was talking earlier, has all the requests from the client. So we use this, and so server HTTP request is one of the methods inside server web exchange, which is used to extract the request information. And after that, we create, or we just resolve the service name, because service name is extremely important before invoking any Dubbo service, because it is the service name which is used for service discovery, and it has its own method, that is resolve service name. It has its own implementation, and it finally returns a service name to this string. And with the help of this string, we create a REST path. We initialize the metadata. We create a client metadata that I said earlier, that client metadata would be used. So this is the client metadata, and a Dubbo REST service instance will be created that is looking up into the registry if the client metadata that was sent by Spring Cloud Gateway exists, the equivalent method exists or not in the registry or Dubbo service. So if it is null, we just go on with invoking another filter in the chain, because it means that Dubbo service metadata is not found. So, but if not, if this is not the case, we go on to the next methods, implementations, generic service class, and finally we invoke it using generic invocation, which I was talking about by using generic invocation. This is Dubbo's method of invoking remote methods, and one feature, very good feature of generic invocation, is that it is independent. It does not need the API of the provider side. So without knowing the actual method name or having the dependencies of the interface API, it can invoke a remote method. It takes three parameters: the method name, the parameter type, argument type, and the argument values. And this is how we get the result, and we can log the result name, incoming response. So this is the main class. This is probably I would say the heart and soul of this entire project, this class. And with this, other request parsers and other applications, request parsers were also created, and I will say that some of the code in this module was filtered. I mean, it was cleared, it was recorrected by my mentor, and finally sent into a mergeable state. So yeah, so before that, what I like to do is I like to start on the provider to just give you a small glimpse about what it actually does, what this project actually does. So provider, a web sample, let's invoke or let's run a Dubbo service. Recently it was Dubbo service. Let's invoke this method. So a short description about the class, the application name, the service name is this: Spring Cloud Alibaba Dubbo provider application. It works, it gets exposed in 8081. I have chosen this port. So before that, as I already said, the registry uses Zookeeper. We need to start the Zookeeper. So I'll start on with starting the zookeeper zk. Okay, yeah, so zookeeper has already started, so let's start this class. So yeah, so the provider has started. If we just have a small glimpse at the log, yeah, it is started at Tomcat server port 8081, and some very important details are being fed in the log. The REST metadata is exposed, the Dubbo service is exposed, a registry has started, right? So let's check it on in a local host. So the local host which I had configured it is 8081, and the request mappings is this like name, like this is a demo. So this is basically the query parameters. So yeah, it renders name demo, like this is from the REST. Okay, so this is how a provider is started. So what I like to show is instead the metadata, which I was talking a lot about, metadata registry. Let's look into what's there in the metadata. What is there in zookeeper. So I go into the zookeeper directory. So 2181 is the port. 2181 is the port where zookeeper starts. So yeah, let's see. Okay, so as you can see, services and zookeeper, like if the producer was correctly exposed, it should reside inside this node. Yeah, so as I said, Spring Cloud Alibaba Dubbo provider is the name of the producer application. Yeah, so this one. So yeah, it is correctly exposed, rightly exposed. So let's copy this and let's see what's actually inside this node. So yeah, we get this ID. We just copy this hash value, which is pretty unique for each of the providers and changes with each instance. Instead we do get. Yeah, so this is the metadata that I was talking about. So what this our filter does is it creates a client metadata. It creates this filter. It creates a client metadata, it sends the metadata, it searches the metadata and rightly invokes using generic invocation. So this is the data from the service and it just searches the exact required methods and it invokes finally. So yeah, so this is how the filter implementation works. Another thing that I'd like to show is the filter. They were to just ensure that it is working properly. All the methods are working properly. There are some tests to be run. I use a JUnit with Mockito to run the tests, like resolve name if this works properly, because it's very vital that these methods are configured properly if you want to create the correct client metadata. So let's run this. Yeah, so it passes the test, so this works fine. So this filter implementation works fine. So this was a brief overview of the entire project, and further what is in store for this project is after this after a Maven POM file is being generated and being provided in the Maven central repository, users can use this module, users can use this functionality and invoke it using their own gateway implementation, and users would invoke this filter like this is just a dummy. This Dubbo demo Spring Cloud Gateway is just a dummy gateway class, just to show that how it would work. So this like users would create something like this gateway class, and they would just return a new Dubbo gateway filter, which would be provided in the POM file, and inject some of these instances, important instances, and yeah, configure the route, and yes, this is how they would do. So short update about the project. This project is a lot, some of the codes in this project was refactored, cleared and tested and everything by my mentor, and it is being pushed, it is already being pushed into the master branch of Spring Cloud Alibaba, and some of them have already been merged. So that is the update, and my latest commit for this was to test some of the functions, testing some of the functions in the master branch itself. Yeah, so final changes for Spring Cloud Dubbo, some test cases, and back again I pushed it in the master branch. So yeah, this the entire project was the entire implementation during this project was a very interesting concept. I learned a lot of important concepts, and it was very interesting. I was helped by the Dubbo community, Alibaba community as a whole, to carry on, and with the proper guidance of my mentor, I learned a lot, and it was a wonderful experience participating in this program. So I'd like to thank the entire Alibaba open source community for having provided me with this opportunity. Thank you very much.